course, there's been news since I did this presentation.
Yes, there has been.
It has been budget, it doesn't include a bunch of the stuff,
Exactly.
at least for the time
So
being.
some of the lines you have to modify on the
Well,
fly.
I'll try to modify them as they go today, okay? Okay, first of all, thank you for doing this. What we're hoping to do today is give you what we think is the guidelines for doing the ADUs in Greenberg. We've also looked at, we have separately, if you want to see it. Yes, ma'am.
Can you just talk about what your committee's done and when you came together and
Sure.
just give us some background? I think that would be helpful.
Sure.
On the slides.
It's actually later in there, but why don't we just do
Oh,
that?
okay.
Do you want to do it, Johan, or do you want to do it?
Mission of the committee is to create a strategic plan and supporting legislation that expands the opportunity for people of all income levels to reside in comfortable living spaces without overburdening their financial resources. The guiding principles are that these residences should be seamlessly intertwined into the surrounding community. Where possible, these residences should give the resident the opportunity to gain equity and improve personal wealth. Opportunities to provide inventory near public transportation should be a priority. Supporting legislation should encourage long-term residencies and tools such as mixed-use developments, including but not limited to commercial, residential, and the integration of senior housing with family housing should be considered.
What we want to be clear about is there are all kinds of affordable housing. There's the Section 8 housing, right? There's workforce housing. And then there are the set-asides that we do as well. One of the things we found out yesterday, which shocked the heck out of me, that only 22% of our inventory in residential inventory in Greenberg is actually rentals. Something I would not have thought until I actually saw the number. That makes it even more difficult to do what we're trying to do, obviously, because then you have other things like taxes that you have to think about too when you come into it. But we're trying to look at that. The reason why we're here about ADUs today, ADUs is kind of a low-hanging fruit, number one. And number two, there's a lot of activity surrounding our area already in ADUs. And we have that slide if you'd like to see it. And three, our governor would have liked to put it into the budget this time. I think it's lucky she didn't, because I think we have a better plan than that. And what you're going to see today, by the way, we just came from thank you, by the way, for the support to go to the New York Planning Federation. It was very good for all of us. And one of the things was a whole seminar done by Keaton Bean on ADUs. And what we're going to present today hit every one of their check marks. So that's what it is. So let's just go through it. It is a viable housing tool for sure for affordable housing. But it's not for everybody. I don't think any of us want to see families living in basements and attics and garages. I don't think that's an appropriate place to bring up a family. So we want to focus our law and craft our law to focus on singles and couples. It's only a small piece of the puzzle, but could be an effective piece of the puzzle that could maybe give us 200-300 maybe. That's something for the town board to discuss how many, if we want to limit and how many, but 200-300 units we don't have now. For perspective, if you take a look at the housing, what is considered the affordable housing shortage in Westchester County, it's about 11,500 roughly. Our percentage of that would be 550 units. Just if you did it based on population, just so you know that's the case. Our percentage of people that are house poor or household stretched is less than the county. It's about 32.5 versus about 40 for the county. So we're doing a better job already than our neighbors, but we still have to do a lot more. And we know that. As we know, Governor Hochul had proposed ADUs without any constraint, including seeker. And we didn't want to, I don't think any of us here would want to override zoning. And obviously, thank you for all the support from all the town supervisors that lobbied to keep that out of the bill. I think it was extremely helpful in doing so. The surrounding communities, as I said, are adopting. Tarrytown, Dobbs Ferry have already adopted laws. I'm not sure who else.
Hastings.
Hastings too, okay.
Yes.
And if we don't adopt it, sooner or later, she's gonna get something through. Okay, so we need to be out ahead of her on this. And importantly, it's a good thing to do. Our objective is really to give people an opportunity to do this, which also obviously also mitigates people's situation with their house poor. Because it gives, or imagine somebody who wants to age in place, they could move to the ADU and rent out the rest of their place and still age in place. So there's a lot of advantages.
Do you mean
there.
house rich, cash poor?
You can be house rich and cash poor. Yeah, that's one way to do it. Yep. Okay, not how, right, house rich, cash poor is good way to put it, I think, Francis. But we want to make sure it's consistent, that we're using it consistently and not overwhelming anything to the point where we change, the nature of our neighborhoods. We're a very strange bird here in Greenberg because we're not like anybody else. We're not a city, but we're not a village either. We're kind of in between that. We are a mosaic. Okay, so, and we have a lot of residential communities. So how do we do this without affecting the overall ambience of that, but having a law that actually works? And that's what we're talking about. We want to do that through a special permit process. Can you move on to the next slide, Garrett? Okay. Our proposal would be ADUs should be no smaller than 400 feet. You don't want a closet.
Square feet.
Square feet. Well, 400 feet would be good if you're really fit. No larger than 800 feet, or 800 square feet. Well, my feet aren't square, so that's why I have a problem with that. Or 30% of the size of the existing house. We do not want to overwhelm a small house. If you have a 1,200 square foot house, we don't want an 800 square foot ADU. They should comply with all setback FAR and impervious surface coverages in the underlying zone to maintain the character. Each one should have a kitchen and a bathroom, and which has got to be self-sufficient. The egress from the house must be direct to the outside, and I think that's a safety issue to me. Okay, I just remember when I think it was the Bronx where with the basement apartment where all those people got killed in the fire because it wasn't a direct egress. We've got to make sure that, I'm even concerned about attics from that perspective, because we don't even allow, I think in our code anymore, anybody to build a bedroom in the third floor. So it has to be direct access to the outside, even if it's an attic. At least one off-street parking space. I can tell you on the planning board, there's so many neighborhoods here where there is no room on the street to park. And in the winter, we don't allow parking on any street, except maybe a little bit in downtown Hartsdale. So they need an off-street parking space. No additional front entrances. Again, if they have 2 entrances in the front and want to use one of them for ADU, that's fine. But if they don't, the entrance would be in the back, again, only to try to keep the character of the neighborhood the way it is. Okay. No more than one ADU per residence. And one of the residences must be owner occupied. In other words, they can live in either the ADU or in the primary residence, but they have to stay on the property. We don't want absentee owners. Okay, and finally, obviously, it should comply with all building and fire codes. Okay.
So when you're saying the ADA, you should have your own kitchen, that would be a separate kitchen?
Yes. It's like imagine a small apartment. That's what it is. We're allowing a small apartment in what would have been a single family zone, typically, okay, on the property with these provisos. As I said, we would want to do by special permit.
So have you come up with a new definition of single family? Because as you know now, we base it on the number of kitchens.
We would have to modify the code as we do that, I think, for instance, to allow these in the art zones.
One of the reasons why we went to the number of kitchens, this is before our time, is because with same-sex marriages, there was illegal and it was discriminatory to say it's okay if you're married, but if you can't get married, well, that's now not
We also, I can remember.
So we avoided, let me just finish.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So we avoided that by going with the number of kitchens because it
Mhm.
wasn't based on your living style. It was based on what would be the impact. And so everywhere throughout the unincorporated area of the town of Greenberg, the single family has one kitchen, two family has two kitchens and so forth.
So we have to modify the law to do that. I mean, there were even in our time, I know there have been houses that had a second kitchen because they had a second family living in the house illegally, but they were there and they were taking care of their Mr. Lucido. I remember that. Because there's one house very close to my house that was like.
We have Frank Morabito now.
Francis?
We have Frank Morabito now. That's not.
I know.
I just
Yeah.
want to interject why this meeting is very important. But we want to make sure that we are crafting a proposal that has a reasonable chance of being accepted by the town. So this feedback is that now this one point that you just raised, oh, we never thought about that. So that law has to be changed to accommodate. So
Yeah, I think also, because this doesn't seem to be limited to, this seems to apply also to our smallest lots. You can get an extra parking spot on a lot. You just take away the front garden that we,
I can't,
why not?
because you still have to meet FAR and all the other requirements of the zone. So no, you can't. So that's to limiting that. Now, a lot of houses already have 3 spaces. Remember, we require 2 spaces per residence.
Correct.
Okay, if you have a 2-car garage in a driveway, you've got 4 spaces. You don't need another space.
Well, if you have a garage, a 1-car garage and one parking space in front of it,
Then
you
you only
have,
have 2.
you have your
And then you
two.
didn't have a problem. If you don't have a lot of extra space, it's gonna depend on the size of the lot, the size of the current house. And also where you're
And
gonna.
then we have to look at that though, as far as the, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No,
interrupt
go
you.
ahead, go ahead.
We have to look at that though, because on many lots, I've seen this, on many lots, you can meet FAR and still basically take out your front lawn. And it looks like it's just, yeah,
That's a good
you
point.
just have parking. So we
Good
need to
point.
address that, particularly if you're
Because I
talking
don't
about
think we
small
want to
lots.
have parking spaces on the front lawn. I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely, we don't. Gary, could you just go to the last slide for a second, please? There are some other issues that we are still open. Some of the laws that we've seen have actually capped. I think the Tarrytown law does, and I think the Dobbs law does. I don't think I've seen the Hastings law. Or maybe I have, because I think it's.
I can tell you a little bit about Hastings, though,
Okay.
anecdotally, yeah.
But I know that they have capped the number of ADUs that are allowed. So it's something we need to consider. And we probably want to do it in a way that's equally distributed across the town so they don't all end up on Manhattan Avenue or any place else, or off of Millwood Road or whatever. My guess is they won't all end up in Edgemont, but but they will. I think they need to be equally distributed. We don't want to put them all in one area. That would not be a good thing.
Well, then what you'd want to do is do a radius. If one goes in, then a certain radius doesn't, because if you say throughout the town, that's
No,
a
well, that's why the
common
question.
number.
That's why the question. If we would break the town up and then look at within a 2-mile radius with a blank number, and that's something we have to discuss. The other thing that we discussed that we don't have an answer to yet is whether we can limit how many people live in an ADU. We'd like to be able to limit it to a couple. Okay.
That's what you suggested. I thought you said single
or two.
or 1 or 2. That's what I thought you said.
Well, that's what we're trying to do, whether we can do, you can do it by the bedrooms. Okay, if you limit to 1 bedroom, that limits it to 2.
Right.
But what if you have 2 working people that want to live there? Then you've screwed them, right? Because they can't have 2 bedrooms,
No, but
which you
it's-
could do in an 800 square foot apartment.
Okay.
So the question is legally, can we limit it? And we don't know the answer to this yet, whether we legally can limit it to 2 occupants or not. That's one of the things we have to find out.
Well, we currently limit how many people can live in a dwelling. So the question is,
By the number of bedrooms is how we do it though.
that may be in apartments, but I'm not sure that I'll check, because
Yeah,
some
I'm
things,
not
some
sure
things
the
have checked,
difference.
but I think that it's a fairly high number. That's why nobody ever takes into consideration.
Well, I didn't know until I looked that we actually allow borders in,
Roomers and boarders.
we
Oh,
actually
sure,
do allow,
with
we do
proper
actually
permit.
allow borders in
Absolutely,
Freeburg, in
absolutely.
residential areas.
You gotta get a permit though. Right, it's a permit
Right.
process, yeah.
And you have to have, you can't have a separate kitchen.
Right.
Right.
Right. Ellen, do you
Um,
wanna talk about
Well,
that?
I just, first of all, I'd like to recommend that you speak to Mayor Nikki Armacost of Hastings. She up the committee for the Westchester Municipal Officers Association to, along with Workus, who's a supervisor up County North Salem, I think it is. And she is one of the prime movers in the letter that addressed to the governor that I think everyone said. She did extensive research into ADUs. So she's got a lot of information that can be helpful for you. I think Garrett may have spoken to her. But just to go back to Hastings, again, as I said, anecdotally, we talked about this a couple of months ago and I didn't have time to look at this before this meeting. But I know that they do have a limit on the number of units, if I'm not mistaken. But although their laws are pretty, are less restrictive than most or many, they updated them in something like 2019. And yet they have had very few people apply for ADUs. So rather than being concerned about too many people, it might be a matter of education, and maybe now people are more familiar with ADUs to let people know that it's a possibility. For a lot of people is that the forever concern is that there'll be so many ADUs that will have problems with parking on the streets, of course, restricting the number as Councilman alleviate that concern, but just to help mollify people who would be concerned about ADUs on their block. The other thing I wanted to know is so a senior who may own the house, they can own the house, which just they can age in place. Yeah.
Exactly, which is, one of the things we're looking at, there are lots of things we're looking at beyond ADUs, and so this is just low hanging fruit. Clearly, one of the biggest issues we have in this town is what seniors, that, and where do they go? Seniors, and try to get them in affordable age in place, and also how do we get affordable assisted living? That's another issue that we absolutely have as well. And in response to what you said, when we were at the New York Planning Federation, we heard both sides. We heard one or two towns upstate. I know it's upstate. Okay, so we know that's a different country, but they were getting some pretty strong demand for the ADUs. Okay. The second point I'd make is you can always raise the limit. It's hard to lower it. It's a lot easier to raise it. Okay, so I would suggest that we put some limit, see what kind of demand we would have, and the town board reviews it, in a year or two to see if it needs to be adjusted. Okay, that's the way I would do that. Okay. I believe Edie, by the way, is speaking on this issue on May 11th at the PACE Land Use Institute conference. I believe she's speaking on ADUs at that conference. So just to give you a little idea of what else we're working on, we just started trying to wrap our arms around really what is the need and by category what the need is. Okay, what are we fulfilling and what haven't we fulfilled? That's a tough task. And we're getting there slowly, but we're working our way through that. And thank you for your help on that yesterday.
Oh, good.
You were very helpful yesterday, as were our experts. I think we've got
Yeah,
3
that-
experts, outside experts, that have been giving us some really good information as we go along. One of the things that we were kicking around yesterday, is there a way to make sure, because one of the questions that came up from Territory, she always has some wonderful questions. And she came up with a question yesterday, well, how do we know if we do this, that we're actually helping Greenberg and not all of Westchester? And it's a great question. There are ways, we're not sure exactly what they are yet. We know one that's working in New Rochelle, we believe, to give an advantage to some kind of preference to Greenberg residents for these kinds of.
As
facilities.
renters of ADUs.
We don't know about the ADUs. I'm not talking about ADUs. I'm just talking in general with
Oh,
affordable
okay.
housing. Okay. There are some things, there's a mortgage assistance program that's only available to New Rochelle residents that live there. Okay.
Right, sorry.
Okay, now on the other hand, Eastchester tried to do this a few years ago and got thrown out of court. So we need to look at both sides of it. Still, there's some legal issues, but obviously, if we can, our town is about helping our town. We help our town first. We'll help the community around our town, but it's about helping our town first. And to the point we can do things that help our town directly, that would be our first goal. So we want to get these things quantified. After that, what we're going to do is look at opportunity areas, low-hanging fruit areas, and take 3 or 4 of them that we find and really give us a leg up here. We don't have a lot of place to build out, so it's going to be more repurposing than it's going to be building out. Okay. We've talked about this with Garrett. We also had a talk with the Pace Land Use Institute, and we're hoping that the committee can pick a potential site by, when do we have to pick it, like probably August,
Yeah.
by the fall.
The program is actually going to kick off in the fall, and we were selected to participate. Thank you, Councilman Jones, for making that introduction, by the way.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
So we were able to meet with the director in charge of the program overall. We presented AVL as a viable solution for housing within Greenberg. And subsequent to that, we were selected to participate in the program in the fall. And it's kind of a incubator program for developers and such. And AVL will be acting as a sponsor, partnered with the town and the town board and other representatives within the town as well. And it gives us a real opportunity to look at a site that might be available and how we could build accessible, viable living units within that site. So it's a practical program, and they've had some serious success over the past couple of years since they've implemented.
And that incubator that allows, is there funding associated?
Doesn't
What
cost us
kind of
anything.
funding? Pardon me?
No
It
cost.
doesn't
to
cost
us.
us anything.
No, in terms of, once a site is selected, in terms of defraying some of the costs.
Part of the program includes introducing us to developers and partners that could help with that aspect of it. So if your concern is how does it get built after we designed and all of that stuff, that's kind of part of the program.
Well, one of the things you can do with this, and we might, depending on which site we pick, is you can actually bring the owner of the property, the current owner of the property, in as part of the team that goes through this process in September. One thing I'd like to do before, as I don't want to lose it, we need to discuss what the next steps on this are. I don't want the ADUs to become an academic exercise. I'd like to see it become law sooner than later. So I have a suggestion from you guys as to how you'd like to see us proceed with this. Should we start having Garrett build on the law? How would you like us to proceed?
I think so.
I think you have to work out some of the issues, which is going to be a tricky one as to how we define a single family.
Okay,
Right,
we'll work with Amanda and Joe on that.
right. Because that's going to be fairly significant, because if you change what a single family is, now you're talking about major change to our zoning.
Yeah, I don't know if we have to change the definition of a single family or make this some kind of an overlay within a single family. We may have to do it that way. There may be a way, that may be the way to wire around it. Okay. It may have, remember we went through that with the CCF, was it the CCFs we went through that with?
Right.
Or the battery, one of the two, we went through that. Well, then with
I
the
think it
special
was the
districts,
CCFs, yeah.
with the special districts and stuff, so we may have to look at that.
Mhm.
But I would suggest we work that out before we go to the public.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
well, that
that's
would
why
be-
we're here.
That's why
We're
That would
here
be-
and not
yeah.
at the public hearing.
Yeah.
That's exactly why we're here.
I think it would also be interesting if we could do like a survey of seniors. There's probably a lot of widows or widowers who would be interested in, you know, or being able to stay in their homes. And it would be interesting if we could get personal experiences. You know, there may be a senior on Florence or on Prospect who is possibly facing to live here.
That's the
And if we
idea.
could have as many stories as possible, then we could highlight the fact that we're really helping our existing senior population. Also, you know, there may be people, say aides, you know, there may be seniors who
Thought about
have
that, too.
medical
Caregivers. Yep.
Mhm.
caregivers.
Definition
And,
would be-
and you know, if they had their own private, you know, kitchen, and it was almost an apartment within the house, they might be willing to, work for, you know, have less expensive housing, and at the same time,
Mhm.
you know, be able to,
Mhm.
provide, you know, partial help. So
Mhm.
I see that as real, you know, I was reading some like national publications, you know, even having these programs where we're focusing on the senior population. Maybe we could have Jerry, Jerry Byrne, we have a Meals on Wheels program. You know, and there's probably a few hundred people who are getting the Meals on Wheels, you know, services. That might be a fantastic, you know, target, you know, group, because those are people who would probably benefit a lot from this program. So I just think, I think this is a fantastic thing, what you're doing, and, you know, I think it's really very, to me, it's very, very, you know, exciting. So,
Thank you.
I don't know. Mayor Armacost prepared a whole list that with links to ADUs in all Westchester communities and submitted
Yes, we
that.
have that. I appreciate
Yeah,
that. You
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 have
had
that?
connected me with
Okay.
Mayor Armacost, and we obtained that list. She was super helpful, and that was part of our due diligence as a committee, is sharing that information, and that information will certainly help us as we, you know, formulate a local law.
Drafted law, actually, after we looked at all the laws in the surrounding area.
Great, and I'll share it
Okay.
with the board members, or you, if you'd share it with the board members, that would be great.
Then it said Amanda has been extremely helpful when I needed help. By the way, thank you for her too. She has been fantastic.
You're welcome. It was
You're welcome.
intentional.
I needed
Joe.
somebody to watch over us.
I second that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Right.
Thank the board too.
And she really is doing a terrific job. I mean, we were really working with last Dave because Dave had been with us for so long.
you
And
were talking also about the increasing the single family housing.
We are talking about that as an opportunity. The thing with the single family that makes it difficult. This doesn't come close to helping us enough, and I'll tell you why. We ran the numbers yesterday. What is it? It's over 50% of the residents of Greenberg are housing stressed. And we figured, when we looked at income, it was like over 60% would actually qualify for some kind of affordable housing under the definition of 80% AMI. So when you do a 10 or 20% set aside, if you want to know why rents are going up in White Plains and up in New Rochelle, despite all this building, which is why what Governor Hochul was doing didn't make any sense. It's because all they were doing is displacing other people and building luxury buildings with a 10% set aside, or I think White Plains may have a 20 now, 20% set aside. It's nowhere near enough to do what we need to do.
But it's better than nothing.
It's better than
Well,
nothing.
that's not part of the issue, that you are building a lot of housing, but the number of people you're displacing, you're not accounting for that by the 10%,
We don't have any
20%.
place to build anyway. I mean, if you take a look at our last, the biggest opportunity we had, and I know why we didn't do it, and for affordable units, a chunk of affordable units was Elmwood. It was 14, I think. That was the biggest opportunity we had. It's unfortunate they didn't offer the same thing with the single family. We should look at that, but you can't just do it's harder to do a set aside on ownership than it is with rentals, and two reasons. One of the things in our law on set asides is it has to look at least fairly similar, so it fits in. Try to do that with a house. You're building $1 million houses in Elmwood now, right? Million, whatever houses in Elmwood. Where are you gonna get the $500,000 house to look like that one unless it's empty? It doesn't work, number one. And number two, you have the issue of property taxes. Okay, which is a significant part of people's carrying costs. So it's very, very hard to do with set aside. Set aside in our town, I think we've been under, Garrett knows the exact number. It's 88, Garrett, 90 in the 15 years we've had the set aside in Greenberg. I think that's the number.
Roughly, or a little less.
The majority of those in one place, Avalon,
44 and Avalon.
right?
But that's still.
But we haven't had
those are
many
people who are getting
large
70%.
developments.
That's the problem. We're not going to. We don't have places to do it unless God forbid, we lose all the golf courses. We just don't have those places,
I just think that
except for
me,
repurposing.
I just sort of think that, what you've been focusing on, I think is really, going to give us the highest potential, benefits. But I also feel that, if we basically would do the 10% for the single or 12% for the single family homes, even if it's going to be a small amount, still better than nothing. Because I know a lot of senior people who have, moved into these affordable units, and they're like thrilled. They feel they won the lottery. And I feel that, even if it's a handful of people, again, you could change people's lives. And, people basically always object to housing next to them. So if you have like luxury single family homes, and then this 10% of it is affordable, at least you're, having some affordability, not a lot, but some affordability in, more luxurious, neighborhoods. So I don't see any negative. The only other thought that I had, which, when I was reading the Hudson Independent, a few days ago, and Tarrytown is now going to be building, housing in the office parks, and some of it's going to be
Harrison's already doing
affordable.
it.
And I sort of feel that if we really, every time I go past 119, you see all these empty parking lots at night, and I feel that if we would be looking to create mixed-use housing with affordability.
Absolutely.
I think that would
It's
be
on
a
our agenda.
bang for our buck.
I mean, obviously, the Stop and Shop site is one site. We talked about building on top of Stop and Shop initially. Actually, if you remember, there was a proposal to put a skating academy on top of Stop and Shop at one point. But there are a couple of shopping centers. We think that there's an opportunity where there's a huge amount of excess parking. We could turn it into more of a village mixed use kind of thing. So it's right on. That's what we want to do. I did want to say one other thing about the set aside though. First of all, we figured out yesterday that about $100,000 of income you're carrying is the 30% of your take home is the other thing. And it was, I think we came out with a little over $2,000 a month. Try to do that in this town with our taxes. It's almost impossible to do. What they've done in Tarrytown and in White Plains, they're not doing set asides. They're taking that money equivalent to a set aside and doing it to buy down the price of houses. It's another way to do it with a fund. And we should be looking into what Tarrytown's doing, I think, in that regard.
So just to be clear, we're not talking about eliminating the set aside altogether. We're talking about enhancing and improving.
Right.
So once we're done with our analysis, the work, and we're presenting it to you, it'll be a robust and comprehensive plan to improve on what we're doing right now. So the set asides for right now is what it is. It's not going to go away. We're not recommending that go away immediately, but when we do present our final plan, it would be a definite improvement over what you have.
In terms of the legislation that you're looking at, what would be like the best case timetable? Like how soon do you think, if Garrett and the town attorney, if you're working on it, what would be the quickest?
I don't know what Joe Garrett have to do this weekend, but I would expect to give it by Monday.
Garrett, I'll
Mr.
text you right
Garrett.
now.
We'll have to talk to Garrett about it. I'm hoping we can get a piece of legislation done by June, by the end of June.
That would be great. You know, and the other thing is.
We could, Supervisor, we could model the law off of some of these other laws we've also been discussing, Dobbs Ferry, Ardsley. Those laws are available online. They're well written from what I could see so far. So I could discuss with Garrett as well with the committee on how to proceed. But I think a lot of the groundwork has been laid already.
So,
I think that is also could be a great opportunity what you're doing, because we could reach out to the governor and say, even though her affordable housing hasn't
Exactly.
gone through, Greenberg wants to voluntarily do things that she's promoting. So let's say we could create mixed use housing, say at the Four Corners, you know, and see if we could get grants for flood relief, for traffic improvements. And then we say, we're doing this. Maybe that will, you know, she may get interested in what Greenberg's doing, and it could help us get more funding opportunities from the state for other things.
So what we'd like to do is if we could, Joe, we can talk to you offline, you and Garrett offline about drafting. We obviously have to address some of the questions that have been brought up by the board today. In that, I think they're addressable, but I'd love to be able to get that, you know, on, I don't know what your last meeting in June is.
Yeah, could I make one other suggestion that I'm
Sure.
thinking, because one of the problems, as you know, is every time, you know, you've asked for meetings, there's always distractions and, you know, things, you know, there's
were
other
gonna get
things
to
that
that.
keep, right,
Yeah.
so what if we would
Yeah,
say,
that one.
until we solve this affordable housing, you know, problem, and we have the legislation, that we have a short meeting once a month with the town board during a work session, and and basically we're getting
That's
like a
too much.
progress report, because I feel that if we do something like that, it's gonna force, if it's not once a month, it'll be every 6 weeks, or, you know, pick a time.
Actually, on our charter, it says, I believe, Gina, doesn't it? It says every 3 months.
Every three.
It's actually in our charter.
Right, but I'm saying, what we should, okay, so every 3 months.
Every
Okay.
3 months. It's in-
I mean, we
it's
want to
in our
make sure
charter.
it's substance, so we have.
Yeah,
something to
if
talk
we
about.
could at least stick to the 3 months, that would be
Right.
good. I think we had some challenges scheduling this meeting today.
Right.
So that's one of the things we wanted to talk to you about today is when will we be meeting with you next? We would like to early September and have a definite date, hopefully before we leave here today, so that.
Very difficult to do that,
Yeah,
as you
it's
know.
very
It's
hard.
very
Okay,
difficult.
well,
It's like
okay.
saying, we would like to be on the first meeting of September, no matter what's going on in the town, we would like to be before the planning board. You don't know, because it depends on what comes in,
You know,
right?
Right.
But
We don't.
we
turn
should
people
make,
down. We're
but-
very.
but I think there's, I think that there's, you know, give a range. Like, for example, today, you were on the agenda for
5:45.
5:40, but we made it up because we gave you 3 times the amount of time, right? So,
Right.
No,
If we
no.
could target.
They've only had a half an hour, 45 minutes.
If we could target a
what are
September
they on
meeting,
for?
okay,
Half an hour.
Half hour.
that's what we'd like to do, okay,
Alright.
and we will,
We could figure this out.
okay, and we will be bugging you over the summer about that, reminding you about that over the summer. We also obviously like to come back in June when the draft of the legislation is done.
But I asked,
Well,
why
we
is
can
it, why,
target
if we're looking,
Something, when we talked about the draft, we
Right.
had 2 proposals here, one ADUs and one on, you know.
Just have an ADUs.
Okay.
That's
what I
it.
wanted.
Just
That's it.
ADUs right now.
Right, this is-
Fine.
I have a
We'll make
question. Go ahead, you're first. 'cause you were-
if we're looking to increase as much as possible, why is it limited to single-family zoned houses? Well, there are some single-family homes
It could be
that,
multifamily, yeah. I'm
Well,
not
wait,
sure.
what's the end of your question?
right, there are single families that are actually grandfathered into commercial zones, and they're perfectly legal
Okay.
there, right? There
There
are
are
some
some that are
there are some
both there.
townhouses that are
Mhm.
enormous,
Mhm.
and if they check off all the boxes, they have, you know, the separate exit. Most won't have that, but there may be some that have it,
I'm
right?
open to, I'm open to. looking at
Corner
that.
units.
Corner units.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Yeah, so-
Absolutely. it does. Didn't you have something you
I
wanted to
just,
say?
it's a little separately. So have you guys determined what the definition is going to be for affordable housing? I know when
We're
we
getting
came
very
together,
close.
how's that?
Do you want to go over that quickly, Johan? What we discussed
Well,
yesterday?
right now is consistent with the state definition of affordable housing.
Mhm.
What we're doing is creating tiers within that to include workforce housing that's usually consistent with affordable housing, the criteria, revenue earnings and the like. So what we've come up with so far is 4 revenue tiers or 4 earning tiers
Mhm.
that would qualify for subsidized housing, affordable housing under the traditional sense, workforce housing, and then I think there was a category just above that for a little bit higher earning working class.
We get it,
Housing
Garrett.
that
we
is
get it.
affordable.
You keep
Oh.
trying to highlight it more and more.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Oh, there we go.
So
Okay.
needless to say, it's a work in progress, but we're getting closer.
Right, and we're also doing a separate thing on seniors because we think that's a separate.
As
it's
a
an issue
category as well.
As a category into it.
Yeah.
itself.
So when you say you're doing a separate category for seniors, and I love my seniors, I love my seniors.
Thank
So you know,
thank you.
but you know where I'm going with that. So if we talk about seniors, or what about our young families? You and I've had this conversation numerous times. What about young families or even mid-families in between that? Because somewhere, I'll just say Gina falls right in the middle. So she can't go here, she can't go below.
That's
So
exactly,
where,
that's
so I
exactly
guess
what.
that's just my concern. and I really want to.
I'm not gonna ask you what your personal income is, but what we have done is we have a range, which my guess is you'd fall into, or, you know, a single parent working with people who could fall into, okay, into that range that is in the affordable range, absolutely. And we're looking at them, we're looking at ways of, for one example, let's say you're doing fairly well, okay? But you not well enough to have enough money for down payment. We like some of these people to be owners,
Right.
right? Because it's the only way to create wealth. We just started yesterday talking about looking at co-ops for that reason, because co-ops are cheaper to buy. Okay, not necessarily to run, but to buy. They're cheaper, so the down payment would be less. We're also looking at the concept of a limited co-op. If you're familiar with Mitchell-Lama in New York, was that okay? Bringing that back in some way, shape, or form is part of it. Now, again, the thing we want to do that's a little bit different, because I don't want to recreate Robert Moses. By the way, everybody fine is playing Robert Moses in a movie this weekend at Jacob Burns, or next week in the movie at Jacob Burns. I don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. We want to see if we can do it so that we have a range of incomes within a complex, not just one income in the complex.
And not just income, we're talking demographics. as well,
Exactly.
ethnicities and all that good stuff.
And
And why we sort of said senior citizen, because there's some senior citizen that will easily fall into that
Right.
All of the above.
definition of economic. But then there are some senior citizens who might be house rich, but they still want to get rid of the house,
Right.
and they still want to be in Greenberg. And they want to downsize to a separate house. There are no opportunities to find, a small house for that particular group.
Understood.
So what we're trying to do is by rather than just say affordable housing and break it up in various groups, because we feel that each group has something unique to that group. So you have to foster something for that. Then if you go to the next group, yes, there's some things you have in common, but there's some things are unique to that group, and you need a unique solution to that group. And it goes all the way up. So that's why we don't simply say affordable.
I always get
One of the
very
things you-
concerned. Let
I'm
me
sorry.
just really quickly. I always get very concerned because every time there's discussion around this topic of affordability, it's always a population left out. And this is this is why I want to just stress that point, that we don't leave out, we don't forget about the Ginas of the world, well, you have a house, so
No, but
Well,
somebody
that's-
else, but
that's absolutely-
understandably.
That's
so, you
exactly
know,
our
right,
target. That's exactly our
Yeah.
target.
Yeah.
Right,
We're-
so it
we're
just, that's just
covering all
confirmed.
bases.
Okay.
If you could imagine a unit and is populated by residents of Greenberg, by percentage, we should hit every single category as it directly relates to the overall population. So right now, 18% of Greenberg residents are over the age of 65, that means categorically, we want to create 18% housing within every facility that we sponsor to be able to
We're
support.
never gonna get there,
that.
obviously.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to be able
right.
to support that particular demographic. So conceptually.
So-
And
so
one
when
of
you-
the, just one of the things that you talked about last night was first time home buyers, right? So that was another thing that might apply, but there are contingencies related to that. So you're looking into that,
We
correct?
have to, because our inventory of this town is mostly single-family homes,
Yep.
not apartments.
Right.
One other part of this is something Paul said a long time ago, I think when Shelbourne came up. Hopefully we'll see a shovel on the ground this Sunday, I hope. Assisted living is a big issue because assisted living is only affordable to wealthy people right now. You don't get Medicaid, they'll throw you out if you're on Medicaid. And you're looking at a minimum of 6,000 or 7,000 a month, up to 12, 13, 14,000 a month. I know I just went through this with my mother-in-law. Okay, luckily she has enough money to take care of it, at least for the time being. So we need to look at that too, as part of this, what we can do. We became accidentally became the assisted living capital of Westchester. But we need to be able to address this
Yeah,
for our
definitely.
people.
So in the
We
be-
talked actually about giving Vapor residents an advantage, I remember with.
Yeah,
Shelbourne.
and the problem also with assisted living is the base prices could be, they could say, okay, this is affordable, but then they add on all these extra costs.
Oh, they do.
So it's not, so you could have $7,000 and it could be, I know somebody who's paying $20,000 a month. And so they just really, so it becomes so unaffordable. So I think this is really a national, issue because none of it's so expensive. And they were talking about, one of the options when I've had meetings on this was, making create like a scholarship and put funds in like an escrow. And this way, if there's a senior, say in Greenberg, and they need to pay for a home care worker or whatever, at least there would be funds to subsidize them. So we might be able to come up with some interim steps as well as get some affordability.
Well, this has been a long 15 minutes.
Yes,
And
thank you.
I
Thank you
thank
very
for the
much.
extra
Did you had
Well,
a
yeah,
last
but-
question?
I'm going to add another couple of minutes.
Hold on a second, because I know.
Because at the beginning, you were talking about it's a good thing with her policy to go through. I agree with you. But you said, and she was trying to do this without seeker. Is there any thought that this is going to be something other than a type 2 action exempt from seeker? So it's going to be a type 2 action.
I guess it'd be type 2 under seeker.
So there really wouldn't be any seeker, right?
I have to talk to you, Joe and Amanda, about whether with the special permit, if we could trigger it as unlisted, like a subdivision. I don't know.
Okay, yes, we can go over that.
Because,
It'd
and
be better if it's an unlisted. I agree, because I'd rather
right.
we would do it anyway as part of the special permit. Basically, we do the same questions. anyway.
well, but we know a special permit, if you meet the criteria of the special permit, it's as a right, right? So,
That's true.
so you have to be careful with that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Are you envisioning ADUs to be anything other than single story?
No.
Well,
I
you
don't
might,
think
you might
so.
want to put that in there, because if it's going in somebody's backyard, because they have space, the neighbors on both sides of those, you now put up a 2-story, it really could have an impact on.
That's a good point.
Right, but I think it
Visibility.
depends on the house, it depends on the lot, it depends on what the ADU looks like, and what the house, a house that it's attached to looks
Yeah.
like. So it's gonna be hard. They're
Might
not,
not be
we don't,
attached.
they don't, but one of the
They
things
don't have
that they don't have to be attached.
Right.
So if it's attached to the house and the house has a 2-story area
Right.
on it that can be separated, then there's no reason why it couldn't be 2 stories.
Yeah, We'll go over. all
So,
that with Garrett.
you know,
it depends,
Very
yeah.
good point. Anything else, just email us or tell Garrett.
Right.
And as we're working through this, it's a work in progress, but we
Mhm.
wanted to get to lay out where we
Right.
were with this.
Right.
Right, yeah, we
Okay.
have, it's 6:15 and we're 3 minutes late.
Thank you guys for the hard work.
We'll see you again in
Well-
June and then in September, right?
Okay. Yeah.
6:15
Okay.
and,
Somewhere.
So as long as you have the
We'll try.
definitions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.